Study Bassers! In this lesson, we're going to talk about fretting technique. So we're going to talk about how to press the strings to the frets. Now, fretting technique is not very complicated, but there are a few details that when you understand them, it's going to make a world of difference in how good you sound and how hard you have to work to sound good. So let's talk about fretting technique. Now, this might seem very obvious to some of you, but what happens when you press the string or when you fret the string? Well, the string vibrates between 2 points. So if it's by itself, it vibrates from the nut all the way to the bridge. But when we press the string, we're shortening that vibrating length. And when you make the string shorter, the pitch goes higher. So think of a violin, how it's much shorter and it plays higher pitched notes. So the same thing is happening when you press down the string. So this is important to understand for some of the fretting techniques that we'll be talking about. Your thumb should lay flat against the middle of the back of the neck, pointing up. So you don't want to arch your thumb like this, because that makes it harder for you to reach across the fretboard, as well as it requires more pressure to press down the notes. So when it's flat, it's more efficient. Now, you want to try to keep your thumb somewhere behind your first or second finger, because when it's way out here, once again, you can't reach across the frets quite as well, and you have to press harder for the same result, so it's less efficient. So try to keep that thumb somewhere behind your first and second finger. Now, should your thumb ever move? Well, it depends on what you're playing, of course, but if you're just shifting one fret, your thumb can stay in the same place. But if you're shifting several frets, your thumb will follow the rest of your hand. You might see some players who hang their thumb over the top of the neck. So you don't realize it, but some of them are doing it because they're actually using their thumb to play notes on that bottom string. So here I'm playing this note with my thumb hanging over the top. And then other players will simply hang their thumb over the top to mute that E string. But remember, we've already talked about muting with your plucking hand, so you don't really need to do that in this hand if you're using that approach. But a lot of players that use a pick love to use the thumb over the top. Now, I don't really recommend doing that just because the spread of your fingers is really limited when you hang it over the top, and you have to squeeze quite a bit more. And it's a lot more moving around too when you need these lower notes. If positioning your thumb is giving you trouble, it's probably due to how you hold your bass. So make sure you have the angle right. So you might want to review the holding the bass lesson, and you'll see that all of these technique things work together. How you hold the bass, how you pluck the strings, and how you fret the strings. In the lesson on plucking technique, I was explaining that the plucking hand does the muting on the way up the strings, and then the fretting hand is going to do the muting on the way down. So both hands work to keep the strings quiet. So in your fretting hand, it's possible to mute the strings with any of your fingers, and it's really a good idea in general to keep as much contact with the strings as you can to keep everything quiet. But in this hand, the finger that does most of the muting is your first finger. So if I were to play a note on the A string, my first finger is just gently touching the higher strings, the D and the G strings. So now I'm not pressing these strings, otherwise I would get notes. So I'm just gently touching or rubbing against them to keep them quiet. Now, if I play with any other finger, I still use that first finger to silence the upper strings. So that first finger always catches whatever open strings are above the note that you're playing, or above the string that you're playing. So if I were to play going up, you'll remember that it's the plucking hand that does the muting on the way up. However, on the way down, it's your first finger that's muting the strings. So as I go down, my first finger is catching this G string. And when I play here, it's still touching the G, keeping it quiet. When I play the next string, my first finger is still catching those upper strings. And when I play on the E string, my first finger is muting the A, D, and G strings. So both hands work to mute the strings. Now if I didn't do that on the way down, it might sound like this. And you can hear those added open strings ringing gently in the background. If I mute with that first finger, it keeps it quiet. So it takes a little practice to train that first finger to lay gently across the strings, but it makes a huge difference in your overall sound. Which part of your finger should you be pressing with? Well, it depends on the finger. So since your first finger needs to lay flat against the strings to mute, you need to use more of the pad of your finger on that first one. But now since your second and third fingers are longer, they're going to need to arch more, and you're going to use more of the fingertip to press down. And then lastly, your fourth finger, since it's shorter, you're going to use more of the pad to press down. So if you've played guitar before, you're probably used to arching your fingers quite a bit. But on the bass, the technique is different. So we don't need open strings ringing out, so we need to keep our fingers flatter against the strings, especially that first one. Now, where you press the string in between the frets and how you press the string is extremely important, and it's very easy to do incorrectly. Now, many people will describe this to you the wrong way and cause you to develop some bad habits. So you're not trying to press the string all the way down to the fretboard. So all you're trying to do is just touch the string to the fret. So it's a very gentle motion. It's very, very light. Now, you have to remember that the string vibrates from the point of contact with the fret all the way to the bridge. So pressing the string all the way down to the fretboard doesn't change the tone or improve anything. It just wastes energy. So if we were to play way back here, we'd get either a wrong note or muffled notes or buzzing. That's very unpleasant. So most students, when they have a lot of issues with buzzing, it's because of where they place their finger in between the frets. Now you could play right in the middle, and a lot of beginners think that's where you should play, is right in the middle. But you can play with the least amount of pressure right next to the fret. So in fact, what you should do is do a little experiment and see how little pressure you need to get a clear tone. So start plucking the string and release that pressure until you hear buzzing or a dead note. And then just press hard enough to get a nice clear sound. And you'll probably find that it's very little pressure that you have to apply. So everyone's instinct is when things get loud or fast, they tend to dig in and press really, really hard. Don't do that.